Hello everyone, this is Genius Yoshi, and today we're going to be rating Amethyst and Ruby cards. I have the rating scale right here, where 1 star is pretty bad and you shouldn't be playing this card unless you're really just trying to test it out for fun. 2 is a bad card most of the time, or just a vanilla card, and there should be better cards to play. 3 star is the type of card that you'll include in your deck if you have to. You're not particularly happy to be playing that card, but it's going to make its way into some of its deck for lack of better options. Then 4 star is a solid card to play. Most of the cards in your deck should be 4 or 5 stars. And 5 stars are the, wow, I really like this card. This card does something that no other card does, and I really want to play these cards. And oftentimes, these are the cards that are going to be influencing your ink choices when deck building. So let's start reviewing some cards. The first card we're going to be looking at is Sergeant Tibbs. Now at this point in time, we know that it's a 2-power unknown willpower 1-drop. But to match the other 1-drops, it's most likely going to be a 2/2 for 1, which is a vanilla creature, which is just okay. You don't really want to be playing this. You want to be playing stronger 1-drops if you can, or just move directly to 2-drops or better. Another 2-drop that we have is Dr. Facilier. Dr. Facilier is a 0/4 for 2, but he has Challenger. So when he's challenging an opponent's creature during your turn, he becomes a 2/4, which is a lot of stats for a 2-drop. The problem is that outside of 1-drops and half of the 2-drops or so, 2 of power is not enough to take down an opponent's threat. And then Dr. Facilier just becomes a 0/4 sitting duck next turn and does not punish the opponent for challenging it, other than wasting the time, well, not being able to quest during that turn. So because Dr. Facilier doesn't have quite enough power to take down these 3-drops, and becomes a sitting duck that doesn't punish the opponent, I think it's just about as good as a 2/3 for 2, those vanilla creatures. Nothing too special going on there. Next on our list, we have Jafar, another Amethyst Challenger, who's a 2/5 for 4. And so we can start comparing this card with Dr. Facilier, and there's 2 main differences. So Jafar becomes a 5-power character when challenging. And what does 5 give us? So 5 allows us to take down a significant amount of 5-drops. It allows us to take out Jumba Jakuba, allows us to take out Stitch, which is a 6-drop. You can even take out an Aladdin with Jafar, which means that you can gain an ink advantage or threaten to take out your opponent's characters if they quest with this 4-drop. Very solid in its slot for a challenger. Now there's the other upside, that when you challenge with Jafar, you do still inflict some damage onto characters challenging him back, because he still maintains that 2 power. While it's not ideal, Jafar has typically done its job by challenging and taking out an opponent's big threat, and provides some additional value with the 2 points of extra damage that forces the opponent to take some damage to try and get it off the board. And if your opponent doesn't take it off the board, then you have another 5-power challenge coming right down their way, which can be backbreaking for your opponent. After playtesting this card, I think it's surprisingly good, so I'm going to give it 4-star rating. Keeping on team with Dr. Facilier, we have him dancing on the back of Friends on the Other Side, a 3-ink action song, which allows you to very simply draw 2 cards. Now the effect might be very simple, but this card should not be underestimated. Drawing 2 cards is a powerful effect. It generates card advantage in your favor. You get more resources. The main downsides of this type of card is that typically it costs you ink, so you sacrifice some tempo on the board in order to play it. But the fact that it's a song means that you can sacrifice exerting a character for 1 turn in order to play this card, which makes it almost free card advantage, where you can also just pay the cost if you don't have a character to exert or if it's later in the game. Great card to draw late game, just great card to play on turn 4 by exerting your tree drop and singing the song. It's just awesome all around. Card advantage is king in a lot of card games, and so this card has the well-deserved 5-star rating and should be included in almost every Amethyst deck you can think of. Keeping up with the theme of card draw, we have Maleficent, the 2/2 for 3 with the ability that when you play this character, you may draw a card. And this is a very powerful ability because it allows you to replace Maleficent with something else, adding that card into your hand, either to ink that card or just for a later turn. And this is the type of card that allows you to build a larger ink pool while still applying pressure on the board. And any kind of 1-for-1 card like this is quite powerful. And so I'm going to give this card a 4-star rating. I think it's a good inclusion in most decks that play Amethyst. Next up, we have Donald Duck in the ruby color as a vanilla 2/3 for 2. And as most vanilla creature, I'm going to give a 2-star rating to Donald. It's okay, but I expect a lot more out of my 2-drops, or at least a little more out of my 2-drops. Next up, we have Aladdin, a heroic outlaw, as a 5/5 for 7, that during your turn, whenever he banishes another character in a challenge, you gain 2 lore and each opponent loses 2 lore. And you can also shift 5 to play on top of the 2-drop Aladdin, and maybe other future Aladdins that will be revealed. Now, as a 7-drop, Aladdin is very expensive, and so you really need some kind of ramp into Aladdin, or you need to shift him. But if you go to shift him, then that forces your colors to go into Ruby Emerald, which can be done, and Aladdin is quite powerful. So 5/5 is decent stats for a 7-drop. Well, actually, it's decent stats for a 5-drop. You're really paying for the ability here. Questing for 2 is also decent, nothing special there. But the ability to gain lore and remove lore from your opponent while challenging allows Aladdin to help you come back from very bad positions. If your opponent is on the edge of winning, you can challenge a character, reduce your opponent's lore, and keep them just out of range of winning, forcing them to keep a bunch of characters ready and quest all at once to try and close out the game. And if the opponent just tries to quest with weaker characters, you can punish them with Aladdin and gain the same value as if you would have quested. So there is no cost to challenging other than taking damage, in that you gain the 2 lore that you'd have gained questing with Aladdin. So definitely not a quester, quite a challenger, helps you swing games back in your favor, but he is quite expensive. So I'm going to give this card a 3-star rating. We then have the wardrobe, Belle's Confident, as a vanilla 3/4 for 3, so the beater version that only quests for 1. But I actually kind of like this card in the sense that it's a good 3-drop to play to then sing Friends on the Other Side, which I think is a nice combination. But we probably have better 3-drops in the future. In particular, we have the Maleficent that we've already reviewed that draws a card. That's also a good character that can sing Friends on the Other Side. And really, back to the wardrobe, it's really a vanilla character, so I'm only going to give it a 2-star rating. Let's talk about a more interesting card in Dragonfire. Dragonfire is the main removal card of the format. It's 5 ink, just plain and simple, banish a chosen character. And that has a lot of impacts for the format in general. It means that any character that costs more than Dragonfire can be removed by Dragonfire, and the user is going to be at an ink disadvantage. If a character costs less than Dragonfire, then the Dragonfire user is actually going to be the one at a disadvantage by playing the removal spell. And for 5-drops on the nose, well, playing the characters tends to be more valuable because they do something on an empty board, as in Dragonfire does not. But Dragonfire is a very good answer to remove some of these high-end threats, like Mickey Mouse the Tailor, for example. You have this big evasive character, well, I'm going to burn it down with Dragonfire. Now, there are some things that I dislike about Dragonfire. First of all, I think the 5 cost is a bit prohibitive, because it means that you don't really want to use it on those 1 to 4 drops, or even 5 drops. Although there is some satisfaction into just keeping the tempo and removing whatever your opponent has played for the turn. But in general, you want to use it on 5 drops and above, which means that it's a card that's useless early game, and you cannot ink Dragonfire, which is its biggest drawback, which means that it's going to be a dead card in your hand for the better part of the early game. And that's not really what you want in terms of your removal spell. You want to be able to fire them off kind of at your will, and their other drawback is that they're useless if your opponent doesn't have any character. Now, with what we've seen so far, it's likely your opponent is going to be playing a lot of characters, probably a lot of 5 drops, but I don't think that players are going to be playing much more than 5 or 6 drops as the core of their decks. So I think Dragonfire is going to be useful in some situations, but dead in a lot of early game hands. So you probably don't want to play too many copies of Dragonfire in your deck, or have some ways to discard it and trade it for another card. So because of this, I'm going to give a 3-star rating to Dragonfire. Let's talk about Mickey Mouse, Wayward Sorcerer. So this is a 3/4/4/4 that can quest for 2. So at the base, it's fairly decent stats for a 4-drop. And it has 2 abilities. The first one is Animate Broom. You may pay 1 less to play Broom characters. Alright, discount in ink costs, always good. And the second one is Ceaseless Worker. Whenever one of your Broom characters is banished in challenge, you may return that card to your hand. Now that is card advantage, and card advantage is good. So you combine card advantage with a discount to replay the characters, and you're getting good combat removal abilities off of an already solid card. So Mickey Mouse Wayward Sorcerer is actually a pretty strong card, but it depends on how good the associated brooms are going to be. So far there's only 1 broom revealed, but I'm going to assume that we're going to get more broom support and more brooms to help Mickey Mouse Wayward Sorcerer. Maybe not in this set, maybe it's going to take a few sets, but Mickey Mouse as a card in the centerpiece for a Broom Tribal is a very solid card, so I'm going to give it a 4-star rating. Speaking of brooms, let's take a look at Magic Broom, Bucket Brigade. It's a 2/2 for 2 that can quest for 1, so it's slightly below par for a vanilla 2-drop, as the 2-drops typically have 3 willpower for the same stats. But it comes with the ability to sweep, which allows you to shuffle a card from any discard into its player's deck. Now, using it on your own graveyard can allow you to improve the odds of drawing a card that you've already played, which is very minor. But the ability to deny a card out of your opponent's discard pile can be quite powerful, especially if you discard some of these combo cards like Fire to Cannon. So Magic Broom serves as a 2-drop on curve with slightly weaker stats, or the option of denying a card in your opponent's discard pile, and there might even be stronger cards that we can remove from our opponent's discard pile in the future. All that for the cost of 2 ink, so it's fairly versatile. I think just based on that, it's slightly stronger than most 2-drops, or at least the vanilla 2-drops. Then you can ink this card, so you can keep it as a discard pile control without costing you too much to play it. But the real reason why I like this card is because it's a broom, and it synergizes with Mickey Mouse Wayward Sorcerer that we just reviewed. And maybe it's because I like Mickey so much, but I'm gonna give this card a 3-star, ranking it well above the vanilla 2-drops that we've reviewed so far. The next card we'll look at is this sneaky little fellow, Pascal, Rapunzel's companion. It's a 1/1 that quests for 1 and costs 1, as weak stats as you can imagine. But the use of this card is that it's an early threat that is difficult for your opponent to remove due to its camouflage ability. As long as you have another character in play, Pascal gains Evasive, which means that it can only be challenged by evasive characters or characters that can challenge evasive characters. You know what I mean. Which means that Pascal is a little bugger that keeps on questing in the background, applying pressure to your opponent. And that is worth quite a bit. Now, there is a lot of removal, and the fact that Pascal only quests for one means that it's a small threat. It's not necessarily a must-answer threat that it would be if it would quest for twice the amount in 2. But it's still an interesting threat to play early. Of course, it falls off in the mid-game, but I'm going to give it a 3-star as a threat that is going to be worth a spot in some of the more aggressive decks of the format. Let's take a look at another small-costed Amethyst creature, Yzma, the Alchemist. Now this character is a 2/2 for 2 that quests for 1, and has the ability whenever it quests, you get to look at the top card of your deck and put it at the top or the bottom of your deck. Now card selection is a decent effect, not overly powerful, but it can be useful in combo type decks. The problem is that this card is below par in terms of stats, and that the vanilla 2-drops are sitting at 2 power and 3 willpower, meaning that a vanilla 2-drop can take it out in combat and live to tell the tale, which means that Yzma is going to have a tough time questing, at least more than once, and you really want to quest 2 or 3 times with Yzma to get a lot of value out of its ability. So because of that, I think the ability is quite equivalent to the extra willpower, and I'm going to give Yzma a 2-star rating. Let's take a look at the Fiery Usurper, Scar. Now this is a 5/3 for 4 that quests for 1. The first thing I want to do with this card is compare it with the vanilla 3-drops that are 3/3 quests for 2 or 3/4 quests for 1. Scar just trades evenly with either of those, and there's an argument that the 3/3 quests for 2 just gains more lore for a lower ink cost. So the 5 power really just allows you to challenge 5-drops and take them down, but that's a 4-drop that really can't quest effectively, doesn't quest for much, can get taken down by 3-drops, and whose sole purpose in life is to sit back and try to challenge a 5-drop, and will most certainly die in the process. Overall, I don't see a good reason to play Scar, so I'm going to give it a 1-star rating. The next card we're going to look at is Goofy, Daredevil. Now Goofy is a 3/4 for 5, and he has Evasive. But at this point in time, we don't know for how much Goofy quests. I'm going to guess that Goofy quests for 2, based on the fact that Jumba Jacuba is actually 4/5, 2 lore, 5-drop. And we have Princess Aurora, that's a 5-drop with a 3/5 with the hexproof type ability, protecting your other characters. So we have characters with stronger stats that quest for 2, and even one that has an ability. So I think Evasive is quite worth the 1 power, 1 willpower as compared to Jumba Jacuba. So I'll assume Goofy quests for 2. If Goofy quests for 1, it's a 1-star. Terrible character, you do not want to play this. But as a 2 lore character, Goofy becomes an evasive threat that allows you to pressure the board significantly, and you can still remove an opponent's 3-drop if it's a 3/3, and keep Goofy alive to just keep on questing from that point forward with the safety of Evasive. So because of that, I think Goofy does have some uses. In particular, 5-drop is a sweet spot where you can include a bunch of these cards in your deck and ink them in the early game, play them in the late game. Goofy plays that role perfectly, being a good threat, some removal, and then that can stay alive for these more earlier game threats, and being in that sweet spot of 5. So I'm going to give Goofy a 3-star rating. Staying on theme, it's only natural that we review Tigger next. As the 6-drop Ruby character, he is a 4/4 evasive character. Now, we don't know how much lore Tigger has. It might be 2, it might be 3. I think 1 is out of the realm of possibility, considering that he has to be an upgrade over Goofy. I'm going to guess that Tigger actually quests for 3. but I'm quite unsure about this one. But in either case, whether you quest for 2 or 3, of course 3 is better, but not that much better. I do like that Tigger is in the sweet 5 or 6 spot in terms of ink cost, can be ink, so you can easily include it in your deck, and it becomes a card that you ink almost every time early game, and is a threat to the late game. So for the same reason, I'm also going to give this card a 3-star rating. It's never too late to review White Rabbit's Pocket Watch. This is an item that costs 3, and you get to exert it and pay 1 to give a chosen character Rush. And what Rush does mean, well, it's very simple. It means that your character can challenge on the turn that they're played. They cannot quest, they cannot gain lore, they cannot activate their abilities, they can simply challenge the turn they're played. Now, playing White Rabbit's Pocket Watch means you're not playing something on turn 3 or later, which I'd much rather have just a 3-drop creature on the board having some pressure that can challenge, rather than having to pay the extra 1 tax every turn so that they can challenge. It feels like it's very expensive. It costs you 1 card, it costs you tempo on turn 3, and it also costs you the extra ink, meaning that you're always playing behind curve to play characters with Rush. So overall, just play something on turn 3, and the pressure on the board is most likely going to be more useful than White Rabbit's Pocket Watch. So I'm going to give this card a 1-star, and I would recommend against playing it. Then we have Olaf, a 1-drop that's a 1/3 and quests for 1, which compares to 2 2s for 1 that quest for 1 in the same slot. Overall, they both essentially do the same thing, and they're not very good. So Olaf might live a little longer than 2 drops, but doesn't apply as much pain to the attacking characters, especially starting from 3. So I think as a vanilla character, it deserves the same rank as the other ones as a 2-star. Next on our list we have Magic Mirror, a 2-costed item that has the ability Speak. So you get to pay for ink and exert Magic Mirror to draw a card. Now there's a lot to take in from this card. First of all, it's a card that's only useful really late game, where you have a lot of ink to sink into drawing cards. And if you're spending the 4 ink to draw a card, you're most likely not playing any card on the same turn, meaning that you're kind of desperate for a card draw engine at that point. The second big downside of this card is that you cannot ink it. So this is a card that you want for the late game, but you can't ink it in the early game. You kind of just have to play it on turn 2, and then in the late game start using the ability when you can play around it with your ink pool. Now there's a lot of upsides to that card, in that it's a repeatable card draw engine, which can be extremely powerful, and as long as you can keep up the pressure on the board and keep up putting cards into your ink pool, you'll eventually reach a point where you can draw extra cards every turn and still have the ink to support it. So it helps you to grow your ink pool by drawing more cards to ink. Also, it's a cheap costed item, and with item synergies being present in the game, and this being just a 2-drop, if you can get some good value out of playing it for its 2 cost, then maybe it's not such a downside after all. So I'm going to give Magic Mirror a 3-star rating, and be hopeful that it finds a place, probably not as a 4 copies, but maybe 2 of in certain decks and strategies. Next up, we'll review Mickey Mouse, Brave Little Tailor, the face of Lorcana, and one of the earliest and most powerful card reveal at that point in time. And by powerful, I mean it quests for 4 and it's a 5/5 evasive creature. So there's a lot going on in this card, lots of power, but it's a card that costs 8, and 8 is very expensive. You'll hear me say quite a lot that I think 5 and 6 are the top ends of the curve that you'll most likely want to reach. 7 is pushing it, and 8 is pushing it pretty far. So unless you're playing some really control-ish type of deck that aims to go to the late game, ink a ton of cards, or if you're playing a very rampy deck that aims to reach a 7 and 8 ink cost, I don't think this card is for you. It's likely to be a dead card early game that you'll want to ink, a dead card late game that you'll want to ink because you're still not there and you haven't reached the 8 ink yet. So because of that, I'm going to give the perhaps controversial rating of 2 stars to Mickey Mouse. Now that I've pretty much butchered the 8-drop Mickey Mouse, we're going to talk about an even more expensive card, Maleficent, a 9-drop. Now this is as expensive a character as we've seen in Lorcana. Let's see what it does. So it's a 7/5, it quests for 2, and when you play this character, you may banish chosen opposing character. So it has the same flaw as Mickey Mouse in that it's super expensive. And you can only really reach 9 if you're playing a very control-ish, late-game oriented deck, or you're playing heavy ramp. But, as opposed to Mickey Mouse, when you play Maleficent, you immediately impact the board, removing one of your opponent's biggest threats, making it a very powerful card if you get to play it, as opposed to Mickey, which is eventually going to win the game by questing and it's evasive and it's nice, but Maleficent just, boom, impacts the board. You were about to lose to your opponent's evasive character, boom, it's removed and you have a very potent threat on the board. With that said, it's still a super expensive card, so I am going to give it a 3 stars rating. If we get ways to revive creatures from the discard pile or cheat out big characters, then Maleficent is going to be the character of choice for all of these powerful effects. Last but not least, we have Elsa, Snow Queen. This is a 3-drop and stats 2/3, quests for 1. With the ability, you exert Elsa and you exert chosen opposing character. Now let's think about what this ability means. So, typically in a game of Lorcana, if your opponent plays a character, since it is in the ready state, you can't challenge it. Meaning that unless you have actions or items that allows you to destroy this character, which are very aggressively costed in the game so far, it is impossible to prevent the opponent character from questing. Meaning that if the opponent is ahead on lore, then the opponent can just keep on going ahead, and even if you keep on wiping the board turn after turn, the opponent will eventually reach the 20 lore. But then comes Elsa. Elsa allows you to exert an opponent's character, making it vulnerable to challenges. And this is a repeatable effect, and I cannot emphasize how powerful this is. It allows you to build control decks. Once you've established enough board presence, you can use Elsa Snow Queen's ability to keep on removing your opponent's threats by exerting them and then using your other characters to challenge the opposing creatures. And this is really the perfect effect for these control decks, and it's a unique effect in that only Elsa Snow Queen has that ability from the cards that have been revealed so far. So it allows you to establish control, and because of that and that unique ability, even though Elsa is slightly subpar for a 3-drop, I'm going to give Elsa a 5-star rating. She enables you to play control. She allows you to win from a board state and put your opponent in an almost unwinnable position once you've established challenging dominance. I hope that you've enjoyed my review of Amethyst and Ruby cards. If you did, please subscribe to the channel, give it a like, add a comment. Let me know what are your top 5 cards that have been reviewed today, and I'll see you next time.